Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Reviews of Tyberius D. Of course, you know who I am, and we have a wonderful intro. Today, we're going to be talking about Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, the two anime series that I've watched, been growing up with as a kid. It's got a lot of content, got a lot of things going for it, but we've got that intro, so go ahead and roll that sexy intro. Alright, and we're back. I do apologize. It's been a long stream already. We've been already going up for about 4.5 hours. I did take a break in the middle of that stream, but we've done the Mask Off podcast. We did a Mask Off Up and panel, and so you guys are very welcome to check that out. And I'm good thing I'm ahead on the geopolitics stuff, otherwise I'd be screwed. Alright, without further ado, let's talk about Naruto. Now, Naruto was a show that originally popped up about 2002. It was part of the second wave of the Asian invasion back in the 2000s and the late 90s of anime culture and I'm sorry, not anime culture, but anime and a lot of things that were coming over from the East that were grained into basically the second half of the millennials that we all kind of got used to growing up with. So, you know, stuff like Dragon Ball Z, Teen Titans, all that. A lot of that is part of the generational upbringing that that millennials have, born in the 90s, that we all remember, that we all kind of enjoyed watching. And of course, that's just not, it's not just them. I've got a little cousin that I talked to, well, he's technically a step-cousin, but got a little cousin that I was talking about Naruto with because the show started in 2002 or 2003. I think it was 2002. And there's two parts here. And like part one largely ended like 2006, 2007. I think it was 2007, but I love these. Good to see you, bad man. But yeah, 2007 I think is when the show ended, and of course it moved into Naruto Shippuden, which was a second kind of show, and there's massive differences in these parts, but the 2007 one, Shippuden, didn't actually end until 2017, so that show was running for 10 years. And there was a whole generation that came up midway through the show that was like what you would call Zoomers that largely got to watch the show, grow up with it. And so that's one of the things that kind of crosses generations. And so this show is actually, I'm not going to say it's beloved. I actually only rate this show overall on a B level. But it crosses a lot of age lines, covers a lot of demographic lines that a lot of people like the show for a lot of different reasons. And I was wanting to bring a few guests on and actually talk about this one, but I couldn't get the scheduling to work right. So we're going to do this by ourselves. But anyway, part one and part two, I want to separate this out because part one is significantly different from part two, and I like part one better. And I'll probably talk quite a bit more about part one just in terms of endearment than I will in part two. So what's the plot? What's the story? What's going on here? It's a shonen anime. And for anyone who isn't familiar with shonen or anime or just watching this because you like my content, is that shonens are largely animes that are built out, or I'm sorry, not just animes but mangas, but they're content for largely boys around the ages from like 10, 11 all the way up until like 15, 16, 17. Basically the formative years of your teenage years is what this is built out for. And so you'll have some things that are very much about, you know, kind of rites of passage growing up and becoming a man. But you'll also have some very, you know, appealing things to young men who are discovering their sexuality and whatnot, is that you'll see usually like a lot of big-breasted women, things like that, that you'll definitely see in this show to some degree a little bit. This show's a bag of worms all to itself. And I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but there's some context that definitely, between Asian, or if you will, Japanese culture and American cultures, there's some context that definitely don't max up very well. And then there's also age maximums, where if you watch this as a kid, you're like, hey, this is great. But then when you get a little older, you're like, not so much. But I'll get to the social commentary where and when it's needed. But let's talk about at least the plot, what's going on here. So this is supposed to be a kind of zero to hero story of a guy or a young kid named Naruto Uzumaki who is kind of a dunce and is, he's trying to become, his goal is to become Hokage. And the Hokage is basically the village leader, respected across the lands, one of the most powerful ninjas to ever live. And yes, the whole plot here is this is supposed to be about ninjas, but it's not ninjas in the regard that it's just cloak and dagger and secret spy assassin stuff. It's actually almost exactly the opposite of that. Part 1's a lot better than part 2. But what is important here is that it's its own world. It has a lot of the tenets of being a ninja at the start, but it largely forgoes that as the series goes on. And the reason why is because there's just mad power creep that happens in the series, to where a lot of things are very subtle, subterfuge kind of things that you see in part 1. But by the time you get to part 2, and particularly like the end of part 2, it's like, holy crap! Like you've got demigod level characters and like almost like low level god level to characters and actions, and that's not to count the new show Boruto, which is literally just straight up going god level. So like the stakes keep going higher, but unfortunately it's bad power creep, and it is subject to that really bad. But anyway, tenets of ninja. Tenets of being a ninja basically is, hey, everything is deceptive, be careful what you're doing, and it builds out from there. But anyway, main character, Naruto, wants to be somebody because he's not. He's an orphan. He is kind of the scourge of the community, and the reason why is that it's not alluded to him until later on that he was implanted with a fox demon. It's the QB of Japan, the Great Nine-Tailed Fox. That whole reference, and if you're not very familiar with it, Japan has a lot of references to fox spirits, and the nine-tailed fox is one of the most powerful ones. Sometimes it takes different forms, but in this particular form, the nine-tailed fox is incredibly powerful, and it's basically like a super demon that implanted in somebody will eventually give them like powers. And it's not like unique powers, but Naruto, as he gets older, is able to feed off the powers of the fox, and there ends up becoming a very interesting relationship with the fox because they develop some form of rapport. We'll get into that more in part 2. All right, so he's ostracized, and the worst part is that as it explains more, it actually gets to the point where it doesn't make sense, unfortunately. But he's kind of seen as a pariah, particularly in the regard that he's blamed for a lot of the stuff that the fox does. As an example, the first teacher that he has, the fox, when it was last on a rampage, had killed his parents, and to some degree, this character, Iruka, actively seems to blame Naruto for this, and of course, it's not his fault. And there's really the first arc that you see in this show. Or I'm sorry, I think it's actually more it's either the first or second arc. I apologize, because I can't remember if there's a time or a backwards time arc. It's been a while since I've watched the original part of the show. But one of the first arcs in the show is how Naruto related to Iruka, and at first Iruka doesn't really like him. He's scared of him. There's a lot of social commentary that you can get into a pariah and how to handle that person. And this is not necessarily an interesting examination of that because it doesn't really do a lot to address how to handle a pariah, but what largely Naruto does, and this will be the entire theme through most of the series, is that Naruto, for being a jackass for a lot of the times, is that he's kind of clumsy, he's kind of a dunce, but he is incredibly driven, and he is incredibly, he's driven, stubborn, and to some degree, like, he's that I'm not going to quit type. And he doesn't treat anybody horribly, even though he could. And there's actually a really good arc in part 1 where he meets basically his foil, which I can't wait to talk about. But in a nutshell, to wrap up at least where the introduction here, the story's about this kid who is basically looking for, it's his rite of passage. He's looking for affirmation. He's looking for, becoming a man in his own right. And it's largely that in a nutshell, in a world that is kind of, I'm not going to say convoluted, but it's definitely, it's its own story. And it's not just, it's got a lot of metaphysics stuff in it. So to explain a little bit of what I'm talking about here is why this can get complicated. This world is not like our world where, you know, you just train really hard and then you become an expert. Is that there is a superpower property of this universe, and it's called chakra. Now, you may be familiar with this concept before. This particular version has its own themes and theses. And the world building is actually really good. And I would love to see more things like this spun off. Particularly here in the West, it would be very interesting to see what they would do it. So the chakra in this is that it's a metaphysical energy like many others. But you can harness it, you can tap it, just like most theoretical metaphysical energies. But it has very physical effects, and you can do a lot of different things with it. I'm not going to go into the intricacies of how chakra works in terms of fire nature and wind nature and all that, although the world building's top tier on this one, actually. I do really like the world building as far as this. There's a few nitpicks I have, but it's actually like A tier to damn near S tier world building. So what you can do is that you can use chakra, and you can use it to do a lot of different things. You can use that to just blow fireballs at people, or turn yourself basically into Thor, or you can do some other stuff here. Yes, we would be here all night. You can do some other stuff where one of the more interesting characters in part 1 is that she could play a flute, and she could use the chakra that was infused in the sound waves that she would emit to control people's minds. And this gets into the thing called ninjutsu, or genjutsu, where you screw with people's minds through sound and sight, and a few other things. There's a lot of applications to chakra, and it's wonderful in how it's all built. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, as far as each character's major abilities and whatnot. Naruto actually is one of the most underwhelming characters as far as abilities going straight out of the gate. And almost through all part 1, is that largely he's a brute force kind of person where he just overwhelms his opponents that he ends up fighting, not actively like outfoxing them, outsmarting them, or if you will, using a superior kind of ability against another. He's just not that type. And I'll give you... I got to give some credit to the writer. And I can't remember, is it Kishimoto, I think was his name? Anyway, the writer does some really good at... so he's in power level 9,000. No, towards the very end of this series... They will get to Dragon Ball level characters, like late stage Dragon Ball Piccolo Goku fights is where these characters will eventually end up, and that's kind of where I'm getting at. They're not nearly as tame come the end of the story as they are at the beginning. All right, so what chakra largely allows you to do, which is where I was going, is that it's kind of like a force multiplier. You can use it for certain things. So you can use it to make an attack. You can increase your stamina. You can do all this. And there's some pretty mad feats in all this, but you can definitely see each level that you rank up with. In that when you're introduced to Naruto, it's either that he's just become a genin, or he's about to become one. I can't remember if it starts with him in school or not, or if it goes back to him being in school in later episodes. But you get the story of him being a genin, and a genin is basically the piss-on. You're basically dealt to do very light work missions to improve your skills, and it builds out from there to where you become a chunin, and then a jonin, and then eventually you get into like Kage level. It looked like they were going to have the Sanin as another level between that, but they kind of dropped that, which is unfortunate. But what it largely gets here is that you are introduced to a few other people in his particular troop, and that is 2 other genins, which is Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. And these characters will be there the entire which way. Of course, there's going to be a lot of plot elements that focus around them, but you'll have that, and then you'll have their teacher, which is a Jonin, and that is Kakashi Hatake, which you don't even figure out his last name until like the second series. But anyway, where I'm trying to go with this is that it's demonstrated quite quickly that there is a significant difference between the Genin and the Jonin. And what one of the first episodes is that, oh, Madman, you've actually watched the show. Okay, I didn't know that you were a fan. Okay, surprising, but cool. Yeah, a lot of people are not friends with Sakura. All right, so coming in is that Naruto is not very capable. He's got a little bit of strength to him, but he doesn't really know how to harness it. He doesn't know how to do it. And largely, he just perseveres through everything by grit and determination to kind of win the day whenever it's called upon him. But as an example, is when you watch this kid training, is that the Sasuke is the prodigy. He's the type that seems to always get it. Very intelligent, very quick, very capable. And Sasuke will train, and he'll do it almost on the first attempt, almost every time. There's a few times where he's trying, where him and Naruto will actually be going out against each other. But most of the time, is what is implied by the narrative, is that you'll see a lesson taught. Sasuke will do it. He'll do it almost immediately, quickly, gets it down. And we will literally watch kind of small little montages and cuts where it's highly implied that Naruto will be struggling with it for hours, where something that Sasuke will do on his first try is Naruto will literally take a day to practice it and really get it down. And it's not because he's actually overly proficient or trying to mad hone his skill. He's just an idiot. And that sucks, but yeah. And then Sakura's largely kind of forgotten about in a lot of the narratives. She's largely just there as a plot device, which really sucks because her character is really underserved throughout the entire series. And she's almost to a degree not a character in a lot of regards, but I'll address that as it comes. But you don't really see any major skills from her for the first good while. She'll eventually get a few. We'll talk about that as it comes along. But largely, it's just she's entirely fading over Sasuke and being her fangirl, being his fangirl for a significant amount of the first portion of the show. Kakashi starts getting expanded on pretty quickly. He's usually at first he's very mysterious. She serves a purpose to cry. He's not very serious going into the show. I'm sorry, wrong word. He's very serious going into the show. He's not very open at the beginning of the show. Like, you don't know much about him. He's very mysterious, and that actually makes a lot of his lore. Is that he looks cool, kicks ass and takes names, but you don't know much about him. You get fed stuff as you go along, and one of the first lessons that you have is that Naruto is kind of dumb and insensitive, and he's just like, oh, hey, these are heroes of our village that are marked on this stone. And Naruto's like, cool, I can't wait to be on that stone, just being uppity and doing his thing. And of course, Kakashi will go, hey, the names of all my dearest friends are on the stone. And he's being very somber about it. And Naruto doesn't pick this up, and he's like, they're all KIA. And Naruto doesn't know what that means, and then Sakura has to introduce that they were all killed in action. Of course, Naruto's just like, right. But getting into this is that that's a lot of what you'll see for at least the first third of the part one, is that Naruto is just completely clueless. But it'll give some backstory into like what has happened and why it has happened. There's some good not social commentary, but a good like meta conversation that Naruto is largely raised as a kid without parents, and like the village will kind of take care of him a little bit, but he's scorned, and so no one really is a father or a mother to him. And it's amazing he even has the social skills that he does. It makes a lot of sense, actually, in retrospect, the more you find out about Naruto and how he was raised, that he's able to do anything. And so it's largely implied for Naruto that he's kind of a late bloomer, in the regard that he isn't really given a chance for a long time, and then when people start giving him a chance, because of his perseverance and because of what he goes through, he'll eventually show that he's actually quite capable. And then, of course, you'll find out like who his mother and father is later on down the line. That completely kind of destroys the narrative entirely of what Naruto was going for. That's more in part two, but largely what part one was supposed to be was that Naruto is a nobody. He's got to persevere to get anywhere and kick ass. And you'll have some other characters that both embody that and counter that really strongly. But it kind of starts breaking down midway through part 1 in the regards that the fox that I was talking about. Naruto will eventually learn to draw upon it, and it ends up becoming like one of the... I'm not going to say it's openly a MacGuffin. There's some tricks to it. But what Naruto is able to do is that once he learns the ability to harness some of the fox's power, he becomes kind of overpowered. And it actually kind of ruins the narrative of part 1, and particularly the entire show, is that this is supposed to be a zero to hero story, but then you kind of get the impression going in at this point that he's not quite a zero. He's actually quite capable. Even though it's not his own power, he's able to steal or borrow power from another entity, which makes him a little bit overpowered. And that's it kind of loses quite a bit of the meaning and the method into what this character is supposed to be. And I'm gonna shit on the author for this one. This was a misstep, and it only gets worse from there out. But okay, so you have the original team, and you kind of see where they're all supposed to go. You'll have 3 other teams that are involved in this that will be coming in and out of the storyline as it goes. I'm not going to mention all the side characters at all, but I will attack them as I need to. Some of them are far more important than others. They all serve some kind of a purpose, but except maybe Tintin. Tintin never really solves much of a purpose. But everybody else eventually gets their moment to shine, what they're good for, what they do, and they do add into Naruto's character. And we'll get into later on, towards the end of part 1, you will have a retrieval arc where Sasuke tries to run away from the village, and everybody in the community or the teams that they're a part of all go after him, and or at least not everybody, but some of the major powers, and you start to see the relationship that Naruto has built within his own little subclass of community, and you see where these characters are going, what they're actually doing, and what the relationship is, and you start to figure out that Naruto's having an effect on them, and is becoming a person in his own right, and a contributing member of the team. So, ignoring that, I want to cover a few arcs just to get into it. And I can't remember exactly what these arcs are in order, but if I remember right, the first arc is the Kannabi Bridge, where Naruto has actually just been promoted to Genin. And he's just graduated the academy. What happens is that Naruto and company are first trained up a little bit, and then they're sent on their first mission. And it's supposed to be a really easy mission, escort the bridge builder. Well, the bridge builder lied in the level of threat that was supposed to be going after him. And what should have been an A or B rank mission is given a D rating because it was supposed to be easy. Well, Naruto and company go up against 2 Jonin level characters. And you see very quickly that what the difference in the Genin and the Jonin level characters. And it's that Kakashi's got his handful just dealing with one other Jonin, and eventually when the other Jonin shows up, Naruto and Sasuke largely have to go 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 against that character, and they almost just bite it straight out. So largely happens in this arc. It shows 2 things. One, that Kakashi is incredibly powerful, is incredibly skilled, and actually Kakashi with the better of the antagonist in a particular instance. On another fight is that the other character will get the better of Kakashi, and it doesn't look very good for them. But between Naruto being actually starting to show his capabilities and being crafty, and Sasuke being largely shown as very capable and a genius, is that they actually force the opposing Jonin into a bad spot where he has to release Kakashi, and Kakashi's able to get the other hand. And if I remember right, this is the first fight or the second fight? I think it's the first. I can't remember if there's 2 or 3, and I apologize. It's been a while since I've watched this. But Kakashi's shown very skilled, very capable, and eventually, after he's released, he gets the upper hand, shows his real capabilities in dealing with this other Jonin he's largely put down. The second fight on the bridge itself, as they're trying to build it, where the 2 Jonin are together, Kakashi's versus the other Jonin, and his name is Zabuza, by the way. It's a pretty interesting fight. They're largely toe-and-toe, and neither one can really seem to get the better of the other. But then you have Haku, which is Jonin level, going up against these 2 Genin, and Haku just beats the living crap out of both of them. And what largely happens here is Sasuke is largely implied that he might have died. at this point, because they've actually he almost sacrifices himself for Naruto. And is there a Chachi? Not that I'm aware of. Anyway, so Naruto unleashes Fox powers, and he doesn't have control over it yet. It just comes out of him because it's triggered by rage and emotion for the first time, and he's able to just become completely overpowered. Overpowers this Jonin and just basically punches him. It's through a giant brick of ice, but details on how that fight was going on. Haku had ice powers, was able to do some really crazy stuff with it, and he was basically hiding in ice mirrors, and Naruto gets strong enough that he's able to overpower Haku's abilities and literally punches him straight out of the ice. It was pretty cool. It's a little over the top, but you have that, and eventually, at the same time that Naruto largely is able to pull out the win in that particular fight, is that Zabuza is eventually kind of cornered by Kakashi, and Kakashi loses his fight, wins his fight, and that kind of brings the end of that particular. It brings the end of this particular encounter, if you will, to where this first story is over. What you see with this story during the same time is that you see Naruto's grit and determination. Kakashi's actually trying to teach them a little bit as the story is going, and one of their lessons is to climb a tree. And at first Sasuke shows that he's capable and that he picks up some of the basics, but he can only get so high on the tree. Naruto can barely get up the tree. But what ends up happening is that Sasuke keeps working his way up, but Naruto starts to figure out how to work this particular thing where he can climb a tree with just his feet. And basically, they use chakra to magnetize themselves and stick to the tree. That's what they're trying to learn in this lesson. Naruto starts catching up to Sasuke out of sheer grit and determination. And eventually, if I remember right, that particular episode ends with the fact that Sasuke and Naruto end at the same place at the top of these trees towards the end of the episode. And it kind of shows a little bit that Naruto is actually more capable than he's led on to be, but he just hasn't had like the nourishing that he needs to get there. You'll have a few other arcs that come along. Another example is, and I can't remember, I swear Kanami Bridge is the first arc, but as far as time placement, this this arc becomes first, and that is the arc where he's actually finishing out his days at the academy, and it's largely implied he wasn't able to do a lot of things, and he's literally like a 3-year holdback or a 2-year holdback, where he's had to do the completion exam 3 times now, and it shows like who he is as a character, where he starts out and he's painting over stuff, trying to getting attention, and basically screwing everything up for everybody to be a nuisance. But it's largely implied that he does this for attention. What largely comes about this particular one is that this is where he's dealing with that character Iruka, which is his first teacher, and Iruka doesn't like him, but Iruka is seized by the power that Naruto has and just continually trying, even though he consistently fails, his character, and Iruka does find some respect for that. What eventually happens that is both really cool and really bad all at the same time is that Naruto steals one of the sacred skulls of the village, and this has like very secret techniques in it. Somehow, and it's a little bit of far-fetched, but Naruto very quickly masters a particular ability called the multi-shadow clone technique from the scroll. And it's it's supposed to be like a grade A technique. You got to be really skilled to pull this off. It's not really shown how he masters this at all. It's largely implied that like you can see him practice it just for a moment in a skit, but largely what it is focusing on the fact that a lot of people were looking for him in the scroll, because it's largely implied that another character, and if I remember right, that character is named Mifune, has manipulated Naruto and is stealing this. And Mifune is actually from a rival village from the Land of Water. And so that's the first episode. Okay, well, it's been forever. I apologize. But anyway, so Mifune is actually trying to manipulating Naruto into stealing it, but he's convinced Naruto to steal it so he can learn something incredible with it. Mifune was going to kill Naruto and take it from him and run off to the rival village. What happens is that Naruto runs into Mifune, and Naruto is able to run, and Anyway, he's able to run away, and then Iruka shows up to help defend Naruto, and Naruto's supposed to run away, but he actually just hides right behind a tree or a rock around the region because he was supposed to take off. And Iruka is fighting off Mifune, but what largely happens is that Iruka just doesn't... I'm sorry, Mifune gets the better of Iruka, and he's about to bite it. Mifune is about to kill him, but Naruto never left. And what happens is that there's that exchange before like the final blows hit where the Mifune is making fun of Iruka, and he's like, hey, you're gonna die for this kid that you hate, and all this other shit, like, was it worth it, all that kind of stuff. And Iruka said, openly, he's like, yeah, it is. It's like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of this kid, all this other stuff, but he's strong, he's incredible, and that he keeps trying even when he fails. And he basically gives the highlight reel of who Naruto is in a nutshell. And Naruto's hearing all this, and he literally starts busting down crying. And it actually makes me well up a little bit too, because I know what it's like when you feel like people don't believe in you, and when you hear that's a resounding piece to you, is that it makes you feel incredibly powerful when you hear that somebody does believe in you, or sees the good in you. And yes, Iruka is pretty cool, and his character will have some up and downs during the series. But anyway, somehow I'm still in the first part of this, and we're 30 minutes in, so this is going to be a long one. Anyway, getting out where we're going here is Naruto hears this, and Naruto jumps in to save Iruka. And at first you're just like, oh great, now they're both going to die. But it's shown that Naruto has somehow figured out how to make this multi-shadow clone technique work. And it's also shown that he's actually stupidly powerful when the nose meets the grindstone, because he's able to make 2,000 shadow clones of himself. And if anyone doesn't want to know what this is that basically he's able to use one of the energies, which is shadow energy, or shadow chakra, to make 2,000 clones of himself. And basically by sheer numbers is that he's able to punch Mifune, not necessarily to death, but he's able to completely just manhandle him. Because it's hard to fight 2,000 kids, even if you're just one dude. 2,000 kids is a big losing battle. And so, at least where we are is that that episode ends with Iruka being okay. He's taking a beating, but Iruka's okay. And Naruto and Iruka have some level of respect and admiration for each other because they were in the thick of it. And then it starts building out from there to where Naruto gets into a team. At first, he doesn't really care for the team, but people eventually grow to respect him in some kind of regard because Sasuke will never say this, and this becomes a massive driving point of the plot, is that Naruto was always kind of looking for Sasuke's acceptance, if you will. And Sasuke would never kind of give it to him, but it's largely implied that they both highly respected each other in secret, and that Naruto respected the abilities that Sasuke could do, and was always kind of envious of him. But Sasuke always eventually at the beginning was calling Naruto that it was worthless, that he couldn't do anything, but would see Naruto persevere over and over again. Just because he couldn't do it at first, he would still keep at it until he would literally pass out of exhaustion. And as Naruto would grow, he would rapidly gain respect, or not rapidly, but he would slowly gain respect for Naruto, to the point where, hey, he didn't never say it up until one point, that Naruto had become a force to be reckoned with in some regards. So a lot of that is kind of the first quarter of what you see in Naruto, is that Naruto's just trying to figure out what he's doing. Sasuke is pretty fucking awesome. Sakura is being his cheerleader. Act 2 of this, for a part of the whole part 1, is largely what's called the tuning exams, and this is where they're supposed to show their mettle and see if they're all capable of ranking up. And there's a lot of shenanigans that happens in the main term of this, but you did see Team 7, that's our team, go up against other teams from all of these other villages, see where they rank up. Naruto, the team has to show itself capable at first. They do okay. They're not great. They're not above average. They're not below average. They're literally like right in the middle. And you can see where the team really works and where it really doesn't, what the problems are. And that's quite interesting to see all these teams go at it and what the capabilities of these characters are. But what really happens is you get into these particular battles. At some points in the tuning exams, you have the team matches, and you have some team-on-team conflict, which was really interesting. And then later on, you get one of the main antagonists for the entire series ends up being there, which it's hinted at, but you don't realize until later, is that one of the big bads of the series is there like midway through at the start. And it's like Sasuke and Naruto goes up against them, and they both largely get their asses handed to them, but they show that they can, put up a pretty good fight for people that are at the level that they are. Of course, the story goes on, and, these characters are growing, and you get the one-on-one fights. And the one-on-one fights are interesting because 2 reasons. One, it shows each particular character why they're fighting, gives them basically the character spotlight. What their motivations are, whatever and you really see how everyone kind of gets along and what they're doing for. There's some really impactful moments here that really show who Naruto's character is, but also the people that he's going up against personally and the people that are around. And so you see characters that are a lot like Naruto, such as a guy named Rock Lee. I hate Rock Lee, but he's a fan favorite. Rock Lee is Naruto, but even worse. Naruto is an idiot, but he is able to use a lot of different powers and is actually quite resourceful. Rock Lee is a little bit smarter than Naruto, but he can only use taijutsu, which is literally fisticuffs. He can't use hardly any of the extra abilities. He should absolutely be outclassed in this universe, but somehow he is able to go toe-to-toe with some of the other major heavy hitters in this. And you see Rock Lee, which is a lot like Naruto, in a 1-1 battle, fight against Naruto's foil, which is a character named Gaara. And Gaara is a really interesting character in that he is Naruto if Naruto had given into hate and despair. And eventually you'll find out later on, towards the end of this arc, this arc and this phase, that Gaara is literally almost Naruto tit for tat, in that Gaara has a demon implanted in him, which eventually will find out very, very long down the road. That is one of the mythical tailed beasts of this universe, and Gaara has the one-tailed beast, which is a giant raccoon. It gets a little wonky and convoluted, I'm not going to lie, but you get to see that largely Gaara is literally the antithesis to what Naruto is personally. Gaara's smarter and more capable, but on the other side is that he hates everyone, and is willing to make people suffer and destroy people and all this other shit. Where Naruto, even though he has every reason to largely reject people at the start of the show, he doesn't. He's actually, a pretty kind of heart. And you start to see this where Naruto really cherishes the friendships that he has and the relationships that he's building out through this series, to where he's willing to throw his life on the line. And what eventually will happen here, and I'm skipping over a lot of details. I'm not even talking about the Neji fight as an example. But the Neji fight's kind of ridiculous in its own regard. Maybe another day, maybe another review. Bring me into that. Anyway, Neji fight. Or not Neji fight, sorry, Gaara fight. Eventually, what happens is everything goes to shit, and the village that Gaara and his companions are from is throwing an invasion, basically, with another village to invade Naruto's village from the inside, or from the in and the out, and everything goes to shit. And then, long story short, Gaara versus Naruto in the ultimate SmackDown fight. Sakura is captured and threatened to be killed, and I can't remember what happens to Sasuke. I think he basically gets worn out and tired, and this is after him fighting Gaara for a minute. Gaara starts showing off his mythical demon abilities because he's able to like harness them in a certain way. And Naruto has been trained to some degree to use the powers of the fox. Anyway, all of that long part condensed is that it's the smackdown of the ages, and it is a titanic clash, and it's actually really good because it shows their character motivations. And there's a lot of dialogue that really shouldn't be in a fight, but on the other side of that is that it's a really epic fight, and that Naruto goes all out, and there's actually a really good narrative part where Naruto doesn't even know how he's the strong, and it's largely explained that he's just there to help the friends that he's made, because Sakura is threatened to die, and Sasuke is completely tapped out, and he's probably going to get it too. Naruto's defending his friends. Yes, it's a great fight. So what Naruto is able to do is he's able to use the fox powers to summon a giant frog, and that might sound ridiculous, but the frog, the first meeting of that is that the frog hates him, but again, or learns his respect, because the deal was that when the frog was summoned, is that if he threw Naruto off, that Naruto, if he couldn't, that Naruto would be his henchman. But it's actually implied that Naruto was kind of like one of his masters. Eventually, it's shown that Naruto literally, at sunset, makes it, sunset, Naruto wins the bet, and literally just passes out from pure exhaustion. And then it's actually implied that the frog knew what was going on anyway, which is Gamabunta. And Gamabunta is a huge character that you'll see later on a lot more. But this character shows, I knew that the kid summoned me, and I wanted to basically test his mettle. And it's largely implied that even though Naruto will not know this, is that Gamabunta respects the kid because he has incredible amounts of potential, and he's willing to show that just because he is an idiot, once again, he's willing to stick it out. And so, I love it. Thanks, Cupcake. All right, so anyway, getting into this, it's Naruto and the Frog versus Raccoon Demon Gaara, and it's an epic fight for the ages. Because at first, it's just Naruto and Gaara, and they're pulling up every stop, and then you see Gaara slowly transforming into this superpowered monster. And Naruto's largely holding his own, or if he's getting his ass kicked, he's usually going tit for tat. But eventually, it looks like, oh, hey, giant raccoon monster, I'm totally screwed. It's literally a kaiju battle. But then Naruto's able to whip out his own kaiju. And it's not, as silly as that sounds, it's actually like showing what this narrative is trying to show exactly. Like, Naruto is not a joke. That he is incredibly capable, and when the nose hits the grindstone or the rubber hits the road, Naruto's able to pull out the stops. And this is part implied from him having to work so hard, but also Demon Fox and all this other stuff, and it culminates into one of the biggest clashes that you get within the entire part one of the story, where it's just a knockdown, drag-out fight. And Naruto, by the skin of his teeth, will win. And it's an absolutely colossal fight. And it's a fun fight, or it's an absolutely joyous fight to watch. But what largely happens is more post-fight is that Gaara seems to show that there's something in Naruto that he sees, and it's not just the tenacity and determination, but the good that Naruto is as a person, in that he didn't reject everybody and he wanted to be something that rubs off onto Gaara. And the more that Gaara will actually interact more or less throughout this series, is that Naruto became, unironically, Gaara has a lot more ability, a lot more smarter, all that stuff, is that he learns to be a better person from Naruto and actually embodies, like, literally when he goes about his life, he's like, what would Naruto do? And that becomes a major thematic thing for Gaara, is that he's basically he basically turns into a Naruto light, except in a completely different facet. But a little underserved in some regards, but makes out pretty well in some other regards, which we'll talk about more in part 2. Finishing out part 1, there's an entire filler arc that closes out part 1, but I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is the Sasuke Retrieval Arc, which is what happens is that are you going to tell Gaara's story? I wasn't going to. But synopsis. Gaara is very much like Naruto. It was ostracized. His own dad tried to kill him. He lost his mom at a very young age, barely remembers her. And all the people that he ever loved or trusted, which was very few, eventually had turned their backs on him or tried to kill him personally. And it really scarred him, and it really fucked him up. But eventually, Naruto kind of convinces him to be a little bit different, and Gaara very quickly realizes that his brother and sister, Tamari and I can't remember, Konkuro, I think was his name, they are largely able to become quite an interesting pair because they care about him. And so eventually what happens is that Gaara starts looking for the respect, love, and admiration of others, and when he actually tries, he largely gets it. We don't see this. A lot of this is off screen, which kind of sucks. But Gaara pretty rapidly becomes somebody that's very respected within his community and loved in his community. And when you see him in Part 2, he will be a Kage level person, which I was going to skip to later. But yeah, as Part 2 actually opens up, is that the version of Hokage, which is Naruto's dream, at the age of like 16 or 18 or 19, Gaara is able to be his village's leader. And that I cry so hard. It is a very moving story, and I'm sorry that I have to condense this, but there is no, like, literally I'm gunning for 2 hours at this point for this whole show, and we're at 45 minutes. So I'm sorry I'm skipping over a lot. It's 700 chapters of this whole show, and I think about 700 episodes too. Granted, I'm not talking about filler because filler sucks. Okay, last phase of Part 1 is the Sasuke Retrieval Arc. Sasuke and Naruto almost get to the point where they're on parity. Sasuke is doing his own thing, and he's very capable, and he's very powerful. But what's largely happened is that Naruto is basically kind of a product of his environment, where the better teachers he has and the more friends he builds, is that the stronger he tends to get. And right before the Chunin exams, he meets a character named Jiraiya. And Jiraiya is one of the legendary Sannin. And I do need to talk about the Sannin a little bit here in a minute, but we'll get there. Jiraiya teaches him a little bit about how to tame the fox right before the Chunin exams, and this gets into the fight where how he beats Nechi, and particularly how he beats Gaara, is the powers given to him by the fox, which Jiraiya teaches him. But what really happens, that is kind of the motif for the show, is that Jiraiya teaches Naruto a technique called the Rasengan, which is actually a technique that we'll later find out was developed by the fourth Hokage, which will end up being Naruto's dad, which is just, it's so criminal that isn't a thing. It's hinted at a lot, and I'm pretty sure that the author wanted to go that route, but it kind of loses a lot of its mentality when that's finally revealed. Scratch that for a minute, and getting back into this, the Rasengan is no joke of a power, and it actually matches. It matches Sasuke's major power, the Chidori, blow for blow. And what largely is implied here is that Sasuke and Naruto get into a fight. And it's not like a sparring fight, it is an actual fight. Now, it's not to the death, but they break out into all the stops, and Kakashi basically has to come in and stop them. At first, Sasuke is completely convinced that he was going to win because there's 2 water tanks. And it's symbolic as all hell, to the point of ridiculousness. But what happens is 2 water tanks, Kakashi gets in the middle of these 2 about to attack each other and throws them into the water tanks each. And basically their attacks go into the water tanks. What you see with Sasuke's attack is that it punctures a big old hole in this water tank and it spills out everywhere. What you see with Naruto's is that it bends and dents the whole living crap out of one side of the tank, and it's got a little bit of hole of it that's slowly draining out water. What you don't see at first is that Sasuke tries to run away, Kakashi's trying to talk to him, and eventually kind of pins him down on a rafter, but he's on the back side of the building. And what he sees is that, if I remember right, like water drips on him or something, and he sees the other side of Naruto's tank, and it's completely blown out. And he actually realizes that Naruto not only is on parity with him, he might even be stronger than him. And it's weird because a lot of things start falling into place, unfortunately for a bad end for Sasuke, to where he basically has a bit of an identity crisis. And it's not because he hates Naruto. In a way, it's that he's got a rivalry with Naruto and that he's supposed to be better than him. But all of a sudden, he's not. And that bothers him because Sasuke's main motivation, that I haven't talked about, is that his entire family has been wiped out in a massacre. And the person who massacred his entire clan, and that's not just his immediate family, but everyone in his entire part of the village, was killed by his brother. And that's his motivation, is he wants to get revenge on his older brother. If he's getting beat by this, whippersnapper of the kid that's not able to really do much of anything, he's not gaining the power and the strength that he needs to defeat his older brother, which is a prodigy unto himself that makes Sasuke look like a joke. And his older brother's quite significantly older. If I remember right, there's probably like a 5-year age gap, if not a little bit more. And I apologize for not remembering off the top of my head, but Sasuke is implied to be a prodigy of his own right. But in comparison, when you get... give me a second here. I wanted to say Shuichi, but that's not it. I am so dumb right now. I apologize. Somebody help me out here. Sasuke's older brother is... he's obviously Uchiha. It's not Madara. It's not Shuichi. It's not... I'm forgetting everybody's names now. Fuck. Thank you. It's Itachi. Holy crap. I'm sorry. I'm just a little brain dead. I've been streaming for 5.5 hours. So anyway, Itachi Uchiha. Great character. Awesome character. Anyway, he is completely overpowered in his own right. We'll talk about him a lot in part 2. But Itachi killed his entire family. And he's an outcast. He's basically... he's not a rebel. What's the word for it? He's basically a felon. Itachi's a really interesting character. And he gets retconned to hell in part 2. But with Itachi is that he kills his entire family. He's a complete badass, and it's largely implied as you get more backstory with him. He's even more competent than Sasuke, to the level of where Sasuke was completely over the top when it came to Naruto at the beginning of the series. That's the level that Itachi is over Sasuke. And that's at the same age. Is that Itachi was just incredibly gifted as a ninja, and completely overpowered in his own, pretty much as any right to be. There is a small excerpt that I will go into, is that Itachi, in his own form, will go up against Kakashi and two other Jonin, and by himself will basically take down all 3 of them. He doesn't kill them, but they're largely... he's able to completely one-shot Kakashi with one of his abilities. And to show you that Kakashi was no joke in, the earlier arcs, is that you see that Kakashi's strong and competent, and then Itachi just comes in and basically one-shots him with an ability called Tsukiyomi. Anyway, not going to talk about all that, but just to show you, Sasuke's character is surpassing Itachi, and he has one of those crises where he doesn't feel like he's getting stronger. Naruto's actually passing him, and he doesn't feel like the Leaf Village and the people that are teaching him. And I'm sorry, I've got candy. Isn't treating him to the way he needs, and so he decides to run away to a place where he knows he can get more power. And that is to one of the other 3 Sannin, Orochimaru, which is the big bad that we saw in the Forest of Death. And this is how they kind of figure out what's going on, is that it's largely, they find out later that it was Orochimaru that they fought. And Orochimaru is very famous, or if you will, more infamous in who he is. He's very powerful, he's very capable. And so Sasuke runs away from the village to go learn from him, because if the village won't help him, he'll go find somebody else. It's largely implied that Orochimaru will eventually steal Sasuke's body, and there's a whole thing about that, which I'm not getting into. But even with that, Sasuke knows that he's going into the depths of the demon, because he is so committed to defeating Itachi that he'll do whatever it takes. And there's a lot of meta in here, but that actually gets more sorted out in part 2. So I'm going to skip over most of that. What largely happens is Sasuke knows this, what Orochimaru plans to do with him, and he goes anyway. And he starts leaving. The band of the teams, basically all the male fighters, which is kind of shows, or at least most of the male fighters, get together. They go after Sasuke, and Orochimaru's henchmen largely stay in the way to fight them off, and you have basically everybody pair out in a one-on-one conflict. It's really good fights, and the henchmen are some of them. There's one or two of them that are kind of suck, but there's others that are quite memorable. The girl with the flute that I was talking about at the beginning, as far as one of the powers, she's one of them, and her fight's very interesting in what she can do. They all have very unique powers, and they're very interesting in how they all play out. I'm not going to say I like the fights a lot, but particularly with that character, I really enjoyed the mechanics there. Anyway, everyone has a one-on-one fight. Our heroes win the day, barely. They all pretty much have a Naruto moment. They fight to the end. They barely win. They pass out. And then you get to the final battle, which is actually Naruto versus Sasuke. And Naruto... Holy shit, this is an impressive marathon. Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, Sasuke is basically committed to completely leaving because he wants to be powerful, and he's already gotten a boost from Orochimaru from the Forest of Death, where he was actually bitten and given like some what is called a curse mark, where he gets a significant buff if he basically feeds into it, but it'll eventually feed back and it almost will kill him. They're able to boost his levels, his henchmen, by giving him basically letting him undergo a transformation. And then you finally get Naruto Sasuke, right? With the abilities that both of them have learned, Artificial Sage Mode confirmed. Yes, you're absolutely right. Sorry. With all the abilities gained up to this point, Naruto and Sasuke are largely on an equal playing field. And it kind of, you can talk about the different levels between the buffs and the boosts and all this stuff, but they're largely on the same level. And eventually they have a fight because Sasuke is absolutely committed that he's going to leave because he has to get stronger. And just in the fact of running away, he's actually gotten stronger, which is its own thing to itself. Naruto's committed that this is his friend. He's going to look out for him. And if he has to beat every bone in his body to bring him back and show him what to do, he's going to do it. And so they have basically, this was supposed to be the original end for this whole show, was that Naruto, Sasuke were going to have it out. And I think it was supposed to be implied that Naruto was going to win that. He doesn't. And this is to extend the show and become its own thing entirely and become part 2. Anyway, to finish out part 1, Naruto and Sasuke fight. It's an absolutely epic fight. It's one hell of a fight. You see all their motivations on display. They're literally, both of them get more powerful just in the process of the fight. It's not Goku versus Frieza, but it's pretty epic and pretty long. But eventually, you see all their powers on display. It becomes a final end fight and final clash, and Sasuke comes out the victor, but just barely. That largely ends part 1. There's an entire filler arc behind this, but I don't talk about that because the filler is trash for the most part. There's a little bit of good filler here and there, but I'm not going to go out of my way to talk about it. So, part 1 largely comes with an end with Sasuke having run away, Naruto beaten within basically an inch of his life, and the folks have to come in and regroup. There's a little bit extra with part 1 where they do have some Naruto basically having a falling out where he's not upset with Sasuke, he's actually beating himself up because he feels like he failed. Not only himself, but he feels like he failed his friend. And that will definitely come into part 2, which we'll just kind of start now. Now, I'm going to try to cover part 2 in an hour. Fuck. For as long as part 1 is, I think it's only like 200 and some episodes. And, part 2 is like 500. So, there's a lot that happens here. But I'm just going to drop over the few major points that I want to go over. Talk about the things that I think thematically worked and didn't work, and why. Part 2, I have far less of a positive opinion on. One, because the narrative changes significantly, but also the setting changes significantly. In the regards that what kind of comes off is very gritty in part 1, and very, it's gritty, and it's zero to hero journey to some degree. and that a lot of these thematic things are working out, is that part 2 completely goes a different direction. Not from the start, but it evolves into this. This is a world of ninja, and to a large degree, you can believe that these characters are basically super ninjas. They have special powers, but they don't really break the universe in the regard that, oh yeah, these people can, basically be qualified as weapons of mass destruction. Powerful, but not ridiculous. They're basically just like very low end demigod level to some degree. Is that they've got special powers, and the only real out of the box fight is Naruto and Gaara, which is demon powers. So you can kind of be forgiven with that, and then Sasuke and Naruto, because Sasuke basically gets demon powers to his own right. So over the top, but you can be forgiven, and if the show had ended here, you'd largely be fine. But then you get into Shippuden, and Shippuden just takes that, amps it up to fucking 900, and just doesn't stop. By the end of Shippuden, you have everybody at top-end demigod level, and some characters at low-tier god level, to where Naruto, Sasuke can easily wreck cities. It's largely implied that Kaguya ending out is almost planetary level. I don't think she's that. She's definitely like continent buster, but it's just holy shit. So let's talk about how we get there. Part 2 opens up with Gaara being Kazekage, and it's a big narrative to where when Gaara will finally meet Naruto again, is that Gaara is in the position that Naruto is striving for and trying to achieve. You have two things happening at the same time. Gaara is fighting two people, a part of an organization called the Akatsuki, which are stealing all 9 of the mythical tail beasts, and you don't know why yet, but they want to do something with that, and they're basically taking them out of the people that they've been sealed inside of, taking the powers for a nefarious purpose, and Gaara is obviously the first that they have to go after. Gaara puts up an amazing fight, but eventually is defeated, and almost gets to the point where he dies. At the same point, well, technically he does die, but we'll get there later. At the same time, Naruto and Sakura are training against Kakashi, and they're showing that there's been 2.5, 3 years, something like that has jumped over. I think it's 3 years that they've jumped, or they've had a time skip. So Naruto's taller, looks a little older, that kind of thing. Sakura does too, and she's been training under the third Sannin, Tsunade. And I didn't really talk about Tsunade in part 1, but she's kind of the example of the shonen that I was talking about. Just big-breasted woman that can kick ass. She has her moments where she's really cool as a character, and she has moments where she's incredibly mundane, and it sucks because the tone shifts that happens with that character is completely off the top. So yeah. Anyway, going with where we're going here. I guess I can read this chat real quick. Hold on. I know, right? No kidding, Wes. Yeah, I'm just not really going to dignify that with a response. Okay, anyway. So going into where we are with part 1. At the same time, Naruto and Sakura are going up against Kakashi, and it showed that they have both increased in their powers and their abilities, and Sakura actually seems pretty fucking competent in this initial fight. You do see the growth that Kakashi has had, and we're not sure if he's actually gotten stronger between part 1 and part 2, or if Kakashi's breaking out all the stops. But he does show all of his abilities and all of his powers that he's got within hand, because he can use fire ability and lightning ability and earth ability and water ability. He's literally all but wind, and it shows that he's a very, very competent ninja in his own regard. Naruto and Sakura have to originally complete the original mission they had to get in the very first trial that they had, but there was no way they could actually even possibly win that in the first trial. This time, they have to pull it off, actually. And they're able to with a little bit of shock and deception, which is more part of the motif of the original show, but also they have to actually show that they're competent and they can, deal with a Jonin level character that's pretty hype. long story short, they are able to. You see that both of these characters have grown, and not only have they grown, they have quite a bit. They have quite amazing abilities. Okay, Madman. Yeah, I didn't talk about the Kekkei Genkais or the Kekkei Toda, because that is an entirely bigger thing that is going on. I didn't explain all the mechanics of the chakras, but suffice it to say, Kakashi is pretty stupidly powerful. And then, of course, he gets only more powerful as the series goes on. But this he shows power creep more than anybody else. But at the start, it's within reason. I don't even know who this person is talking to at this point. Okay, but anyway, going into where we're going here is that Kakashi, he's love Kakashi. Yeah, going in with Kakashi is that they all are told, hey, they need to go on a mission, and it's largely to go save Gaara because Gaara has been kidnapped, and they have to go after. They're able to go after. They're able to kind of go one-on-one with the Akatsuki members that are there. The Akatsuki members are kind of just, tired from having to extract the energy that is from Gaara, but Gaara is actually dead. And then what happens is that Kakashi... Gaara's actually dead, and then there's a character, Chiyo. She gives her life so that Gaara could live again, and Gaara and Naruto have basically a kind of a meeting where Gaara is able to say, "Hey, look, you really had an impact on me. You're a good friend, even though you don't really see the friendship, which is unfortunate." But Gaara had learned a lot from Naruto, and he even became Kazekage, and it's a very meaningful. It's a very meaningful exchange, in that you see how much power Naruto has in the people that he interacts with, and thematically and plot-wise, it's actually a really good interchange. But I'm actually going to agree with Nashi. I think it's Nanashi or whatever. And I apologize if I mispronounced it. Is that it is a little cheap with Chiyo's death, and it's a little easy, but it does help serve a greater purpose later down the line. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. Going into, there's a lot of arcs that I'm going to skip over. There's basically a Sasuke 2 arc where they find out where he is. They eventually meet up with him. Holy crap, I'm not going to talk about Renegade Rebirth. Alright, they eventually track down Sasuke again at another point, and Sasuke has shown that he has grown well, and he's completely outclassed Naruto in the entirety of Team 7. Kakashi's actually in bed at this point. They had a new leader, and they have a new replacement for Sasuke as part of Team 7. So, Team 7, even the team lead, is completely outclassed by Sasuke, all by his own regard. And it looks like he's actually about to do the finishing blow and kill all of them, when Orochimaru calms him down. It's like, hey, look, let's just go. Nice dig, but eventually they bail out, and Sasuke has shown that he's gotten his major desire. Right after this happens, you find some major narrative points regarding Sasuke, in that he was learning from Orochimaru this whole time, getting stronger, and this is the point where Orochimaru was supposed to take over Sasuke's body because he was getting old, or not old, but his body was wearing out on him, time to get a new one. Sasuke basically metagamed him, waited till the point where he was weakest, was able to kill Orochimaru, and basically take his place, and actually take some of Orochimaru's powers, which gets a little weird and interesting. But long and short here is that Sasuke, in his own regard, becomes not necessarily a major villain, but a major baddie, if you will, in this series. And he'll hold that almost until the final arc of the final 2 arcs. Is that he's kind of a renegade to his own right. And so, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna definitely keep this a lot more limited, and I'm just jumping over this. But yeah, I tend to do some big stuff, and then I can coalesce it down into smaller stuff as we do the independent reviews on particular arcs or whatever. But I'm just hitting the major theme points because my brain's already fried. So this might not be the best review ever anyway. Anyway, I wish my dogs would stop barking, but I can't stop. Anyway, getting back where we were. So Sasuke's having his own development. He's stupidly strong at this point. Not as strong as Itachi, or you'll find that out later, but significantly strong, can still absolutely body the shit out of Naruto at this point. So, like, the power level difference that we saw at the beginning of the show is largely back, and Naruto has basically a new reason to go about and doing his own thing, and basically trying to get stronger and trying to learn stuff. There's a lot going on here. The next point that I really want to hit is the finishing out the Akatsuki episodes. Is that the Akatsuki are slowly getting whittled down because basically every village is going after them, and the protagonists will eventually just be able to eliminate them one by one, or even some of the other characters will. Sasuke will kill Deidara as an example and finish him off. And so coalescing this out, getting like where we're at, is that Naruto's getting stronger, not only to eventually be able to surpass Sasuke once again, but he's also worried that he has to deal with the Akatsuki because he's one of their targets. And so, okay. Naruto starts working on becoming a greater ninja, and he works on a new jutsu, which will eventually become a Super Rasengan, or the Rasen Shuriken. And there's a whole training arc that goes into this, where he's learning how to do this. He's learning to control wind nature, something that Sasuke had shown that he can control two natures in part 1. Naruto's just learning his first. And so you still get the sense that Naruto is completely out of his depth as a ninja, and that he's been beating people by sheer brute force and not actually becoming a refined, practical ninja. But yes, the split the waterfall, that kind of stuff. That arc is very wonderful because it shows Naruto's power and his tenacity, and that he can do something that nobody else can, where Kakashi basically says, hey, look, use your shadow clones and you can get in ridiculous amount of training in the same time that you would be normally, because you can do it. You can make hundreds of shadow clones or thousands of shadow clones when most people can make 10 at best. And that's one of the things that you find out very quickly. Even naturally, without the fox, Naruto has an immense chakra reserve, and if Naruto is able to tap into the fox, it's stupid. At the same time that this is going on, though, is that you start really getting some messages regarding the fox. Is that the fox, every time that Naruto uses his powers, the fox is able to break down the seal that, he's able to break down the seal that is holding him within Naruto. And so his powers start leaking out, and Naruto starts transforming at some points, and it gets really bad. He's able to almost kill Jiraiya when he goes on a rampage that is between parts 1 and 2 that you find out a bit way through. Training. The death of Asuma is a very major plot point. I don't want to skip over it, but it's also, like, I didn't explain who that character is in the first part, and he's very important, but 700 episodes, I'm skipping over a lot. I apologize. But anyway, Asuma's death is very important. I'm not going to disregard that, but I'm going to largely table his character for this review. We can definitely get into it when a character reviews and all this other stuff. Okay, so Naruto's training. You're finding out that he's having more problems with dealing with containing the fox, because basically the more power that he uses from the fox, the stronger the fox gets into taking him over. And it becomes this very interesting relationship between him and the fox that is going to become one of the major plot points, almost towards the end of the story. Is that, okay, he's training, he's trying to get better, and he openly gets to the point where Naruto says, I'm not going to use the fox's power anymore. And I don't remember at what point this is, but this is definitively where it really takes off, and Naruto's going to show that he can be his own ninja even without the fox powers. And I really liked this decision. And it really shows Naruto's character in that he's pretty competent even without the fox. He starts developing an ability called the Rasen Shuriken, which is the Rasengan that he originally had, but it's super powered. And he's not able to get it quite right when the Akatsuki attack. They send out a first team to go deal with it. Kakashi's part of that, and along with Asuma's former team. Asuma had died, but the rest of his team was there. So he leads the fight with them, and then Naruto's team was supposed to be backup. They're able to deal with one of the Akatsuki members pretty well because they had planned for it, and they dealt with it. But the other one is a character that's quite powerful, and they're able to go tit for tat with them. But eventually, the original team is largely at the brink, and they've been able to kill 2 of the 5 lives that this enemy character had. But they're at their wits' end, and then of course Team 2 shows up just in the nick of time. Yes, heroes do. And it's largely just Naruto versus this one character. They don't even get the other guys in with it. And Naruto is showing that he's got this new ability. At first he tries to use it, it fizzles out because he hasn't got it down perfectly right. But then the second time he uses it, he lands the hit. He kills the enemy character, and it's shown to be a very powerful ability. In fact, you find out very quickly, it's so powerful that he can't ever use it again because it will literally feed back in himself and make it where he can't use that. He can't use any powers. And eventually, Shikamaru was epic in that, yes. What eventually happens is Naruto has to figure out how to use that technique in a different regard, and that will be for the next arc. Naruto shows that he's capable, he's competent. He literally takes down one of these rogue ninja, the Akatsuki, not necessarily by himself, but still at a relatively high level of power. Naruto was able to go toe-to-toe with this guy. It ends up coming out the victor without really much in the way of sustained damage in his own right. So Naruto's starting to show off. He's pretty fucking awesome. Then there's 2 things that'll happen in the next arc, in the next 2 arcs that happen relatively simultaneously, and I'm not really gonna say which one's which. But you have the Itachi versus Sasuke battle, and you have the Naruto versus Pain arc, and of course there's a training level in this. Largely as Sasuke finally tracks down Itachi to have his grand coup de grace against him, is that Naruto goes on a training mission to develop sage powers, and that's a little bit later. Or regarding chat, what largely happens here is Naruto wants to go and develop sage powers because Jiraiya is killed by basically the top dog of the Akatsuki, at least at the time that we thought, which is Pain. And Naruto is basically needs to learn the powers that Jiraiya's ultimate technique. He's now basically tasked to learn, and he goes and he starts learning Sage Jutsu, and Sage Jutsu is stupidly powerful. In fact, Jiraiya had never mastered it. It's probably why it's largely implied that if Jiraiya was able to master Sage powers in his own right, he would have won against Pain, but because he didn't master it, he actually loses. There's a big conversation about that, and it's a little meta, but I think it's implied. So what happens is that I'll talk about Sage powers here in just a second, but at the same time this is happening, Sasuke and Itachi have their big battle, and it's one hell of a fight. You don't really get the sense of Itachi's motivations yet. He's just kind of a bro crime. True. It's really a knockdown, drag out fight, and to a large degree, but you don't really get the sense of Itachi being who he is, or who he's going to end up being. He gets retconned majorly as the story goes on, and you'll actually see Itachi again. Spoilers, but what actually happens is that Itachi is been playing the role of being the ultimate bad guy, and basically being a wall for Sasuke to overcome. I hate this. The narrative kind of contradicts itself at some point in this, between the fight itself and what happens later. But largely, Sasuke goes into the fight, wants to kill Itachi for obvious reasons. Itachi acts like the bad guy. You're actually implied for a second that you think that Itachi rips out one of Sasuke's eyes. Turns out it's Genjutsu, but holy crap, did that scene shock the crap out of me. But anyway, they have this epic fight. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually, what happens is that Itachi puts Sasuke on the ropes. and that Sasuke dropped out one of his best abilities called Kirin, which is amazing, an amazing ability. But it turns out that Itachi has got this thing called Susanoo. And basically it did a hard counter. And Sasuke is basically boned at this point, but all of a sudden Itachi drops over dead. And it's not really explained until a little bit afterward. It's that Itachi was actually sick and on his last leg. You do see the fight that Itachi, using his amazing abilities called the Mangoku Sharingan, which I haven't talked about at all. Hell, I didn't even explain the Sharingan. Is that he's going blind, and I'm not going to touch the Sharingan yet. I might skip it entirely, actually. Anyway, what we have is that that's the power balance, and it's actually a really good power balance, and I liked it. Anyway, what we largely have is Itachi and Sasuke fight it out. Itachi actually dies, but it's largely implied that Sasuke was not stronger than Itachi, and that Itachi would have gotten the better out of him, but somehow he just crossed over. You'll find out a little bit later on that Itachi was somehow really sick, but you don't see any example of this the entire show. And it makes no damn sense, and it's really unfortunate, honestly, and probably a major misstep in that regard. Okay, going back to Naruto, at the same time, is that he's training. Jiraiya has died, and he is trying to figure out Sage Jutsu. What's so special about Sage Jutsu? It makes you super strong, but there's a catch to that. If you fuck it up, because what you're doing is that you have basically two energies that you have within you. This is taking the third major energy and pulling it into yourself, and you're basically supercharging yourself. The problem is if you take too little in, you don't get anything that happens. It just fizzles out. That's not the bad part. If you take too much in, which is a balancing act, you become petrified. The energy will literally overwhelm you, consume you, and turn you into a stone. Risky, right? Phil Darks is winning on Nikotsuki. Yeah, a lot of that is backfiller regarding Itachi, and it's not done in the best way. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So, excuse me. Naruto shows that he's doing this tenacity thing, and he literally has to. They unironically have to. If he takes in too much power, they have to beat it out of him with a stick, which is a little bit hilarious in some regards. But once again, yeah. Oh yeah, I knew my brain melts on half of these reviews anyway. Like they go 2 hours, 2.5. Anyway, Naruto basically is able, through sheer tenacity, able to master this out, and you really get the sense that Naruto is not a joke, and particularly when he comes back. And of course, I'm going to skip over most of the training because it's not relevant. It's just, again, sheer tenacity, not giving up, practicing like 12, 16 hours a day to make sure it works, using the shadow clones to max out the use of his training. He's able to train relatively quickly and get this kind of thing largely sorted down. And when he actually does go into the next fight, he'll have this mastered, which is great. Yes, I'm insane, but that's fine. But when I get this uploaded, I definitely want to send it off to Spike Kage to see what he thinks. So Naruto didn't use his brain power. He starts to show that in part 2. And I've kind of circled over that, so I will at least tack that. In his first fight against Kakashi, is that he starts to show that he can strategize a little bit, but it's not until he fights Kakazu, which is the first the Akatsuki member that he kills, is that you see Naruto openly strategize, and you hear it in the inner monologue. But he's thinking like, well, I need three shadow clones for diversion. I need another 3 to help me set up this amazing jutsu kind of thing, and you can actually hear him plan. And you see him enact his plans, and you get the sense that, wow, he's actually quite capable. And so, I don't know where that came from. Okay, anyway, so going forward from this is that Naruto's learning in this, the village, Naruto's village, pardon me, comes under attack from Pain, and Pain's able to basically level the place, and just as he levels the place, all of a sudden Oh yeah, I completely jumped over that. I did talk about it. It was a little bit of subterfuge, but I'm not getting into that. Maybe in a more specific review, whether it's a character review or like an arc review, we can definitely get into that. Anyway, to finish out this, Pain attacks the village. Pain basically wipes out the face of the earth, and then Naruto shows up, and it's Naruto versus Pain, one of the most epic anime fights ever. I hate and love this fight all at the same time because it comes in two phases. The first phase is absolutely amazing. The second phase is absolutely shit, and it pisses me off. Okay, so what happens? Naruto is reverse summoned from where he was training. He's got this art mastered down, and it's actually implied that he was working on something else at the same time. Rasen Shuriken on crack, but we'll talk about that later. Naruto versus Pain happens, goes at it. Naruto's able to show that he's got the stops, that he is mastered Sage Jutsu, and that he has figured out how to use the Rasen Shuriken, and that instead of using it as a melee attack where he forces it on somebody, he can throw it. And he can expand it, and do all kinds of crazy shit with it and make it home. That he's made it into a super jutsu. That's quite powerful. It's largely implied very quickly. This is like a top tier S rank jutsu that could take down most people throughout the universe. Naruto's become incredibly powerful just with that, but also with Sage Mode, it's stacked in this, is that it's implied by a very knowledgeable character that once Naruto has mastered Sage Mode, he's not a zero anymore in any regard. He's top tier. He's A or S rank in the entire universe, like top 40, with just in the process of mastering Sage Mode, he is now at least in the top 40 of most powerful people in the world. And that's definitely true. And so what happens is you see Naruto going up against Pain. Naruto strategizes. Naruto shows all of his kits. All of his kit to bear, and he does an amazing job. He will actually lose this fight. I'm skipping ahead towards the end, but largely what happens is you see them strategize. He's able to take down all but one of the other passive Pain, and he gets to the point where he kind of gets back into a corner, and Pain's got him on the ropes. Naruto just kind of loses because Pain's that damn strong. What eventually happens is that that someone who has been interested in him the entire time, which is Hinata, which it's largely implied throughout the entire thing that Hinata has this massive crush on excuse me, kind of a pain that Naruto is. Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I'll get there in just a second. So Hinata is Naruto's friend, but Naruto has no idea that she is crushing on him. But you know this in part 1, and I've skipped over it because it's not relevant until really now. Hinata jumps in to try to save Naruto, and it's largely implied that she's killed. And I think she is killed during this engagement. And what happens is that Naruto, for the first time, has seen somebody that he really does care about. One of his closest friends is killed in front of him, and he basically develops hate. In a true way, and the Fox Demon's able to take over with that, and he gets superpowered. This is the start of phase 2 of this fight, and I hate it. Naruto basically transforms, and he's stupidly powerful, but he's not in control of himself. Pain is just able to go about it. In the anime, this fight is terrible. It's poorly animated, and while it's a massive action fest, it looks like shit. And it really completely undermines the hero's journey that we're going on for me. Because Naruto had shown his abilities and that he wasn't going to take on the Fox. And it's largely surely through the powers of the Fox that he's able to pull this off in the end. And there's this weird part where it separates. Just to put this in context, so for the better part of an episode or two, Naruto's in Fox mode and he's not even in control of himself. It's basically the Fox on a power med refuge trying to kill Pain. Pain drops out his ultimate technique, which is planetary devastation, and seals Naruto within a planetoid. Through sheer power of the Fox, is that the Fox is literally taking him over and transforming into a full Fox, is able to break out of the planetoid. And holy crap. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, basically, he's sealed within basically an asteroid that Pain is able to create through his sheer power. Naruto's able to break out of it, and at that same time, you have a revelation that kicks off. Once Naruto gets to a point where the Fox can completely take over him, there was this failsafe in his mind where his dad, the fourth Hokage, apologize, is able to reseal or remake the seal, fix it, and basically give Naruto an out. And I hate this plot device. I absolutely hate it. But this is the point where you find out that the fourth Hokage was actually Minato Namikaze and is Naruto's father. I fucking hate this. Like there are so many better ways that this could have been revealed. Ghost Kage. Like this could have been so much better, and it sucks. It really does. It's a very meaningful moment in some regards, where Naruto literally, finds out who his dad is and literally punches him in his own head. It's kind of weird, but it's all this is going on inside of Naruto's head during the fight. But anyway, Minato is able to reseal the thing and able to bring Naruto back to his normal self. And Naruto is able to reactivate Sage Mode one last time. Him and Pain, who is very tired from fighting the Fox, has one last round. And Naruto comes out the victor. I narratively, functionally hate all of this because it completely undermines this fight. It would have been great if Naruto would have been able to pull off the stops himself, but between the Fox coming in, his dad being revealed, it's way too much. It's way over the top, and it does it in the wrong way, and it hits badly. And of course, what makes it really bad is that Nani just hit it. Is that there's no consequences. What ends this fight is that you find out that the six passive pains were avatars, which was largely implied already. But Naruto's able to find the original one, and you find out you already knew this, but it was one of Jiraiya's former students, and he has a one-off conversation, and he taught no jutsu's Nagato, and literally Naruto gets his name from Nagato. It's amazing in how there's a really great meta thing that's going on with this, where you come to find out that, Nagato, one of former Jiraiya's students, Nagato had a book written about him and that he was supposed to be this protagonist that was going to save the world. Naruto gets his name from that character in the book because that was the name in the book, is that changed it from Nagato to Naruto. Naruto gets his name from that character, and then literally the real life incarnations go at it, and it's amazing and yet just shit all at the same time. And it just goes to show that the artist really had something here, but he overdid it in some regards that really makes it fall apart. God damn it, this chat. Anyway, to finish out what I'm talking about, where I'm going with this, is that Naruto's able to convince Nagato that he misstepped, he went the wrong way, and Nagato will sacrifice his own life using an ability called Rene Rebirth to bring everybody that he had killed during the assault back. Kakashi was actually killed. He's back. Hinata was killed. Or at least I think it's implied that she's killed. She's back. Everyone that was killed comes back and it gets happy ever after. This fucking sucks. Oh my god. This arc was trying and it was doing so good, and then it just screws the pooch. Because if this arc had major consequences, it could have been the end, more or less the end of the story by itself. But again, we have to keep it going, and in the process of making this go even further, which I would not be surprised if this was actually supposed to be the end of part 2, that it goes to crap. But anyway, without further ado, Naruto comes back to the village. He is the hero. He is Rene River. Oh god, I don't even want to talk about that. Naruto comes back to the village, even though it's completely level, but everyone's alive, and he is the hero. He is the guy who saved the entire Leaf Village, and he's literally the guy that he wants to be outside of being Hokage. Most people love him, respect him, and everything he's done. And there's this really, there's a really big monologue that happens from a side character, which is really annoying, and it's the wrong damn character to do this with, but we get it anyway, where this character says, oh, now everyone now loves him and respects him, and they see the good that Naruto is, and he's changed them all for the better and shit like this. Good monologue, wrong character. Should have been somebody character that everyone liked. Ebisu is a fucking shit character, and no one liked him. Anyway, so you have that, and then you really kind of get into the last phase of of part 2. You get in the last phase of this after that, and that is basically the Great War arc. Who is shit? Ebisu. Ebisu, which was supposed to be the sensei, he was just weird, and he was supposed to be a pervert, but even worse than what Jiraiya was, and he had nothing in the story, and it just sucks. Like this character shouldn't even existed. Had to have known that. Yeah, Naruto was a massive show. I said this was probably gonna take a 2-hour one. Okay. Anyway, you adapt. Because they caught up to the manga. I know, I believe it. Like, I'm not saying that. Like, no, what I'm getting with is that Ebisu is the person to make the speech, and it sucks. It really does, because it should have been Iruka, it could have been Kakashi, it could have been anybody who was one of the more core casts or even within the secondary. But it was a primary character that nobody fucking liked, who makes the speech, and it just doesn't work. Anyway. Getting where we're at is that we're kind of going into the final phase of this, but of course this final phase is literally the second half of part 2. And that is, it'll start with the 5 Kage Summit, but that is the prelude into the 4th Great Ninja War and all kinds of shenanigans that happens in the series. Okay. What all happens here is this. The Akatsuki has basically been defeated, but there's one remaining member, and this person is originally Toby, but you turn out is to be... starts claiming himself to be Madara Uchiha. And Madara is largely implied, even in part 1, that he was one of the strongest people to ever live in this world. But it's largely implied he's been long dead. Anyway, Madara is this character who is incredibly powerful, and this character is claiming to be Madara. And I'm going to skip over the 5 Kage Summit to a large degree. Suffice it to say is this. The Hokage at the time, which I haven't really even talked about, not really relevant. She's sick, can't go. They have to put up a six Hokage to hold the moment. And I'll get to this. Anyway, 6 Hokage is there, absolute horrible piece of shit, and it's done through political intrigue and a bunch of nonsense. Anyway, all the Kages get together to talk about what to do about the remaining Akatsuki member, or the Akatsuki member, and how to handle things because the world's been upset and been incredibly unbalanced. At this point, Sasuke storms in to kill the 6th Hokage because he has a vested interest in killing him, because it's implied that, it's implied that this character had set up Itachi to do some fuck shit. And I completely skipped over this, but at one point Sasuke is supposed to be part of the Akatsuki and goes up to fight a major character called Killer B, gets his ass kicked, but it's largely during this time that he learns that Itachi was not the man that he thought he was, to some degree. And there's 2 phases where this happens. Number 1 is that he finds out that Itachi was sent on a mission to kill the rest of the Uchiha clan. And so he has to figure out all that, and he tracks down this 6 Hokage Danzo to figure it out. Turns out he won't be remembered as the 6 Hokage, whatever. Storms the Kage Summit, starts bodying Kage-level people left and right. Doesn't kill them, but absolutely just takes on 2 or 3 of them at a time. And Sasuke has just shown that he is incredibly powerful after the death of Itachi. And he actually is developing his own Susanoo. He is developing Mangekyo abilities, which we haven't even talked about the Sharingan. So I guess I'll do it now. Anyone who is an Uchiha member has visual abilities in their eyes. Now, at first, the Sharingan is basically like supervision, where you can just see everything that's happening in slow-mo, and so you're able to react to everything. It's just basically super eyes that you're able to process a lot of optical information. What happens is that if you push it to a high enough limit, you get what is called the Mangekyo, and each Mangekyo ability manifests completely differently. Sometimes they're related, sometimes they're not. But as an example, Tsukuyomi, which is what Itachi uses to body Kakashi, is one of Itachi's 2 major abilities. And then you find out that you find out that Sasuke has his own abilities, and they're related to each other. I'm not going to go into it a lot, but he gets his brother's ability of Amaterasu that his brother had in one eye. He gets it in one eye as well, but the other thing is that Sasuke's other ability in his eye is he's able to manipulate the flames and do all kinds of crazy shit with them. Once you unlock the 2 abilities, is that you unlock a 3rd ability once you have it practiced enough, which is the Susanoo. The Susanoo is basically just super powerful avatar that can go around and just beat everyone's ass, that you basically inhabit the shell of. And he uses the Susanoo to go absolutely ham on the Kage Summit, and he's able to fight Gaara, he's able to fight he's able to eventually fight the Mizukage, and I can't remember her name at all. And he eventually gets bullied down to the point where he almost dies, but then Madara, quote unquote, comes in and saves him. And then Madara shows that, hey, I'm declaring war on all of you. And the 4th Great Ninja War is about to start. And it just, this, oh my god. To be honest, it's an incomplete Susanoo. Yeah, I guess it's a relevant detail. Sasuke's just figuring out how to use this ability during the 5 Kage Summit. Is able to use phase 1 and phase 2, and it is completely overpowered just in its own right. And as he breaks it open, it gets even worse. But it just shows that this character is powerful as hell. Anyway, Toby, which is now Madara, is going around and being like, hey, I've got some big dick energy. I'm declaring war on all of you. Get fucked. It's just hilarious. The world dominator in you not wins with excitement. I'm not going to say that. I'll put it this way. My favorite anime is Code Geass, so I'll let you make that decision for yourself. Anyway, let's finish this up. Let's wrap it up. 5 Kage Summit comes to an end with basically everyone being allied, but the 6 Hokage Danzo had ran out during the middle of it, right before Toby had declared war. I'm sorry, that Madara had declared war. Madara is able to help Sasuke recover, and then he helps track down Danzo, and then you have the Sasuke Danzo fight. That's just fucking amazing. Danzo is an absolutely terrible character. He's made to be hated. He serves his purpose very well. Sasuke eventually kills him by going full out and showing the powers of the Susanoo, and it's ridiculous. He's able to unlock phase 3 and just beat the living crap out of him. Danzo has some really crazy abilities to himself. We're gonna table all that because that fight is ridiculous, but it's cool. It's actually one of the more meta fights that you see in the show. Right after that, Naruto and Sasuke have an encounter where they see each other again for the first time in a while. It's implied that they're kind of on the same power level again, but at that point, Sasuke goes blind, and you're like, oh, well, that's pretty much over. Madara comes, saves him, and transplant Itachi's eyes, which we'll deal with later, but that gives him super-powered Mangekyo abilities that he'll have forever. And it basically is Mangekyo on crack, and it's broken. But we'll just ignore that for a while, and we'll get back to it. So, sorry. I know there's a lot going on here, but I'm just giving a general overview. Yes, he does. So if you're reading chat, that's what's going on. I just don't want to talk about it. Danzo's abilities are stupidly and powerful. He manipulates Sasuke to make him go blind. Okay, I didn't catch that. From what I understand is Sasuke just basically goes power mad, because every time that you use his abilities, it makes you stupidly strong, but you go a little bit more blind each time, and basically Sasuke, in his rush for power, he puts him in front of Danzo. Well, that's because Sasuke wanted to be there. I mean, unless I missed it, Sasuke is trying to fight Danzo because he thinks that Danzo fucked over Itachi and basically manipulated Itachi. And of course, this is when you find out whenever the eyes are transplanted from Itachi into from Itachi into Sasuke, that Madara is not I've got a completely different analysis here. Is that Toby #Madara at this point is not manipulating Sasuke. He's trying to make Sasuke even more powerful to use as a device because he's run out of pawns. But anyway, Sasuke is given Itachi's eyes, is gotten even more powerful, and then what is a major character development for Sasuke is that Toby, aka Madara, aka we'll find out later is another Uchiha, which I'm drawing a blank on for a second. Somebody remind me his actual name. Anyway, what happens here is that it is revealed that Itachi was not the person that we were led to think. Is that he was in some regards manipulated, but moreover is that Itachi was actually like this ultimate good guy, where even though he killed his entire clan, it was to stop a coup d'etat that his clan was going to do. So Itachi, not the bad guy, the Uchiha were the bad guys, and it's fucking ridiculous. But for the lack of the character, Obito, thank you. For the narrative, it actually ends up working. A lot of people don't bitch about it. I fucking hate it, but it actively works. Itachi's actually put together in a way better light, and the Uchiha are put collectively in a pretty bad one. But it's also that putting Itachi in a good light has a massive character development for Sasuke, because his entire moral compass is, my brother is the ultimate enemy, the ultimate evil of the world, and anything that he would do is not okay, and anything that is in opposition to that is good. And when he finds out that's not the case, he literally has an existential crisis, and he completely breaks down. And you have a major character development arc with him trying to figure out himself, and that's largely him for the rest of the show, is how he's going to handle that, and what do you have to do to be good, what do you have to do to be bad. Like, he literally has a moral crisis, an existential crisis, and how to handle that. And I do like that a lot, is that while they flip the script completely on its head, with Itachi actually being a good character, it puts the emphasis on Sasuke's reaction to that, and it actually makes for a really interesting dynamic. So while I hate the transition, it actually makes a really good purpose. And so, yeah, Sasuke has a complete mental breakdown, and he will largely be dealing with that for the rest of the show. So I'm going to table that and go back to more of Naruto and what's going on in the rest of the world. What is revealed during the when Toby, aka Madara, declares war, is that okay, I see where you're going with that. Anyway, what's going on here is that Toby had declared war on everybody, and is revealed what his actual plan is, which is kind of ridiculous. But he says, "Hey, I'm going to war with you. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to capture all the tail beasts to erect the ultimate tail beast, the 10 tails. I'm going to take it in me to become the ultimate Jinchuriki, and then I'm going to use it to activate a massive genjutsu, which is a mind control ability, to control the world. You know, so basically world domination kind of shit, right?" So he reveals his entire plan, sets up the Great Ninja War, and everyone's starting to, Matrix, kind of Matrixy on a global scale. Anyway, sets up the final act here very well. You have the fourth Great Ninja War, where Toby is openly fighting against everybody else, and he's recruiting whoever he can to his side. There's not a lot of people left, but Sasuke for a moment is supposed to be one. Eventually that won't go over. Anyway, where the plot largely goes is that at first everyone's preparing for it, then the war breaks out, there's some skirmishes along the line. The two remaining Jinchurikis, which are the people that hold the demons, is Naruto and Killer Bee. which we dealt with just a very little bit. I didn't talk about this character. Actually, really cool character. I'm going to table him because it's just, I don't have time. Naruto and Killer Bee are sent into hiding. They have some really interesting conversations, and Killer Bee trains Naruto to basically steal the Nine Tails' power to use it for himself. And basically it's implied that he's going to be able to transform at will. That doesn't quite happen the way it's supposed to. Naruto eventually has a mind battle with the Nine Tails in his head, uses Sage power to counteract the Nine Tails power, wins that fight, pulls the power into his head, and this is where you find Ghost Mom. You hit it right when I was thinking of it, but you also get the backstory into the Nine Tails as his own character, which gets kind of fucking ridiculous. But you also get Naruto having Kurama Chakra Mode, or KCM, and Naruto just gets stupidly powerful with this. Anyway, so where we're going from here is that Naruto's getting way stronger than he already had been because he's got Sage Mode and he's got KCM, and KCM's stupid by itself. He'll eventually learn to merge these, but I'm going to table that for a moment. Okay, has an interchange with the Fox. The Fox is just basically this irate asshole because he's been jaded. But Naruto's like, hey, I'm going to, eventually I'll fix you too one day. And this will get resounding. What eventually happens is that the war's going on. Naruto hates that that him and Killer Bee are incredibly powerful, and yet they're sitting on the sidelines, and everyone's fighting to protect them. And he's like, fuck that. If this war's going to be fought over me, I'm going to take front and center stage, especially when I'm literally one of the biggest cannons you've got. They basically go into the fight. I'm going to ignore the implications for a second because they were supposed to be hidden. There's a big conversation over that. There's a bit of a fight that regards from that, but eventually they get the go-ahead. Naruto and Killer Bee engages with Kakashi and another character, and I forget what his name is. Guy. Anyway, they go up against Madara, fake Madara, Toby Madara, whatever. And they go up against the 6 Jinchuriki that were killed that had their things distracted, but they were killed and they were never brought back. Gaara doesn't have his abilities anymore, but he's still alive. Everyone else was killed when they had their demons taken out of them. Or, well, their tail beasts, whatever. Anyway, so, what happens here? Just epic kaiju level battle. It's completely over the top. Madara Toby, yeah, gotcha. Anyway, what happens is massive battle that goes on. Naruto and the company are basically pushed to the limit, and 2 things happen. One, you get the real story on this Madara character. He's not the real Madara, which I've been hinting at for a while. His name is Obito Uchiha, and he was one of the teammates that Kakashi had growing up. Turns out he's still alive, but some plot points that actually had happened. You find out about this now instead of way back then, which shows that the artist wasn't planning ahead too terribly far. Anyway, plot points are revealed. It's Obito, which is a former classmate of Kakashi, that they actually have been childhood friends. And so that's revealed, and yes, I will agree with that. He has the most broken Mangekyo ability. He's overpowered as fuck. I'll table that. Anyway, so it's them versus him. They are able to defeat the Jinchurikis, but it's a knockdown, drag-out fight between this one dude and 4 other people, and one of them, Naruto, and Killer Bee, both have demigod level powers. So that kind of shows you where this character is, and he's winning. What eventually happens at the same time is that he's able to draw out the tailed beasts in their own form because he has some kind of control over them, which I'm not going to talk about. But he's able to bring out the tailed beasts, and then Naruto is able to make a relationship with not only one of the tailed beasts because he's able to interact with them through the dead bodies of the Jinchurikis. It's a little fucked up, but it makes a lot of sense when you watch it. This all happens, and the Nine Tails, which is at this point known as Kurama, gains a lot of respect for. Yes, I didn't talk about that. Yeah, I forgot. I probably should have. Anyway. Naruto develops a relationship that is positive with the fox, and they team up. And then Naruto is able to use the full powers of the fox, and in a very constructive way, and basically is able to body Obito more or less, but particularly all of the tail beasts that he's able to summon out. And so it's largely Naruto and Obito, or Naruto versus Obito, and plus supporting cast. The point that I missed is that Obito was an Uchiha. He had a Sharingan. He has a Sharingan. One of them was implanted in Kakashi, and I never talked about this, but Kakashi was one of the few people that could use the Sharingan, even though he wasn't a Uchiha, because he had one of their eyes. And what he is largely able to do is he's able to use the basic abilities and copy it. And he basically masters it, become the copy ninja, and he's really, really capable as a ninja because of this. What largely happens is that you find out it's kind of poetic, and that Obito ends up being one of the last villains of the series, and it's his own eye that Kakashi is able to use to become a major power. He's absolutely right in that. I was going to skip over it because I just don't have the time for every one of these nooks and crannies. But it wasn't a bad play. I hate part 2 because none of it is set up in part 1, or very few of it is set up in part 1. And then even in part 2, some of these greater bombshell moments aren't set up until like right when they happen or right before they happen, and it just shows that it's not thought out well enough that really you get that massive payoff. And in some regards, some of these revelations actually demean the show for me personally, because you can clearly get the sense that they are not, that they were not prepared, and it's kind of out of left field, and it really is, yeah. There's a lot of filler in here, but again, I don't talk about filler, and half the time I don't even watch fillers in my anime, so we'll table the fillers. But what's largely going to happen is final fights. Madara actually does come back. He is resurrected at first through an ability called what the hell? Impure world reincarnation. In English, they call it, I forget. Anyway, forget it. Anyway, what happens here is that Madara comes back, and he is able to just absolutely wipe out entire groups of people as itself. It's reanimation jutsu. Thank you. All kinds of hell breaks loose, because Madara is an army to himself. The legends about him were not understated. He is stupid powerful. And literally there's a moment, a small character homage moment, where people are like, wait, this is the power that our ancestors had? Holy crap, we're nothing. So anyway, what largely happens is that it's Madara and Obito versus literally the entire world. And the good guys end up bringing, good guys bring back their own Hokages that had passed away to fight them, because Hashirama, which is Madara's major antagonist, is brought back. But the problem is that Madara was assumed to be dead for a while, but he wasn't, and he actually had gained some powers after his final fight with Hashirama, so that when he was finally resurrected, he's actually stronger than Hashirama. And I'm skipping over a lot of things. God damn it, I wish I could kick my dog's ass right now. My dogs are barking in the background. But anyway, Madara is about 150 years old when this all happens. Or no, I'm sorry, he's about 100, or about 100 and 110. It's I think it's largely implied that the original events that was in Hashirama's time, Hashirama and Madara's time, is about 90 years before. But anyway, going ahead, finishing this all out, is that final fight, Madara and Obito versus everybody. The Ten Tails is resurrected. All hell breaks loose, which is even on top. And it's basically is largely implied that it's the ultimate kaiju battle. All kinds of stupid shit happens. And I just the wheels fall off for me, and I'm just largely going to wrap up the entire series with this. Naruto and Sasuke get incredibly strong. They have a final battle that eventually coalesces around Madara being the Jinchuriki. There's some fuckery that happens, and Kaguya shows up, and it's just holy crap. Okay, I hate to undermine this. Madara is an absolutely wonderful character. He's one of my favorite characters in all of anime. He is a very jaded character. He is a villain in every regard. Stop. Anyway, I don't want to demean these characters or not talk about them. Some of these characters are actually really good, but the problem is that this final climactic clash is so over the top compared to where this journey started, and narratively so inconsistent. I'm not talking. I don't even know if I want to go there. What I'll say is this: the end all with Kaguya coming up out of nowhere just really sucks, and it just the story breaks down for me in a significant level when Madara becomes the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. You have a lot of afterlife shit that gets involved, and it just for me the story breaks down, and it really loses a lot of its finer edges. It's all wrapped up nice, and you watch it because you're invested, but it's just Madara was overpowered. The writer wrote himself into a box where he couldn't beat him, and so he made a character that, while even stronger than Madara, just suddenly shows up, is not as tactful as Madara. And so basically, out of incompetence, she is defeated. And this largely ends out the series, and it sucks. It really does, because there's some really good parts about this. There's some really bad parts about this. I'm completely just glossing over this. But he really ended up... the show really just ends kind of poorly with this final thing. The final fight between Naruto and Sasuke is the perfect ending. I didn't even talk about it. Fuck. I was literally going to skip over it. Okay. I will talk about that, because I'm losing my mind with how bad the Fourth Ninja War ends. Okay. What happens is eventually Naruto and Sasuke defeat all the other bad guys because they're stupidly powerful. And it really becomes the conversation of an alliance between the powerful is no alliance at all. Brento, I wish you could, but I'm just going to wrap this up here in the next 5 minutes anyway. I would have loved to have you on. Sorry. But anyway, what largely happens is that Naruto and Sasuke have their final second fight. And it's so fucking over the top. It's a great fight. I enjoy it a lot. But you can chip in and chat, but reviews are also this whole thing. No, they're not. I did a review with Nate Dallin on the MCU. I am happy to bring other people in, but I need to have it ahead of time. And I reached out for a lot of people to do this. I never got any feedback, and I'm sorry, Brento, I didn't ask you. Anyway, table. Naruto and Sasuke have their final ultimate fight. It's great. It's fun. And narratively, it's not horrible. But largely it's been so over the top between everything that had happened for the last 100 episodes or at another point, that some of the meaning's lost on this. And the show largely comes to a conclusion. Of course, Naruto wins the second fight. And I'm not going to say it's all bad. It's not. Sasuke gets his character arc kind of fully justified from what had happened with Itachi being made out to a good guy, is that he basically becomes the final antagonist for the series, because he has this really weird idea of what power is supposed to be used and how the Kage is supposed to act, which is completely antithetical to what Naruto wants. And basically, either one of them is going to be the supreme leader when it comes out to it, because they're more powerful than almost everybody else combined. So it's basically a fight between the two most powerful dudes. And it sucks that two 16 or 17-year-olds are the most powerful dudes in the series, but that's how it ends up, and it's just... It could have been a lot better. It could have been a lot worse. But again, I have a lot of praise for part 1. Part 2 just goes off the rails at a certain point, and it never really puts it back on. It tries to, and it gets a little bit closer in some regards. But between the some interwoven complexities between points that are changed up, some are demeaned, some are gadded, some are gained. This overall ends up turning into just a kind of a clusterfuck that's B tier for me. The story is okay. It's a great slog, and you're really invested by the time it gets to the point where it's shitty, so you just, you can't really turn it off. But, so what Brento is saying is kind of true, is that it's not conveyed in a very good way, and that's actually my biggest flaw with the final fight, is that Naruto is trying to convince Sasuke that you need the people around you in your life to help you grow. And Sasuke has largely embodied the idea that you don't need anybody, that your power is from yourself, and you should embody that to the fullest. And there's a lot of narratives around that is built out. And I am skipping over the meta conversation that's actually there, and I probably shouldn't, because that's really what these reviews are for, is getting into the meta conversations, and I'm a little burnt out because it's 2 hours in. There's a lot of meta conversations that happen throughout the show. I've skipped over most of them, but some of them I've touched on. What part one is largely about the Zero to Hero story, and it just gets undermined by the fact that, one, Nine-Tailed Fox, and it's completely blown the fuck out by part two, when you find out that Naruto is basically a prodigy in his own self. He just didn't have a family to bring it out of him, and when he finally gets it, he's just stupidly powerful. So that's really undermined. The other closing thought here is that, The other closing thought here is the importance of people in your life. And this gets into the Ashura Indra conversation. This gets into Hashirama and Madara, and of course Naruto and Sasuke. The meta conversation is largely around how you relate to people in your life, where the Ashura in his incarnations, being Hashirama and Naruto, get their power from the people around them. I would describe it as the power of love. It is that when you participate with other people, you love them, you cherish them, they make you stronger, you make them stronger, you grow together. Indra and Madara and Sasuke is largely about making a power amongst your own self. Is that becoming the greater part of you that you can. And even if you're willing to commit evil acts or bad acts, it shows you are using the power that you have to affect the world in the way that you see fit. It's very Sith Lordy. And honestly, this is an Eastern-made show, right? And it actually has a lot of parallels to the Sith and the Jedi from Star Wars that you see from like Knights of the Old Republic, is that Naruto basically takes the path of the Jedi, and Sasuke takes the path of the Sith Lord. And yet again, the fucking Buddhist philosophy of the Jedi is shown to be the better side of this instead of the Sith Lords, because fucking people suck. But hey, whatever, we'll just deal with it. So making yourself better is bad on your own strength. Having a relationship with the community is more important. Yay, hooray. Of course, you all know that I just really disagree with this. Obito has his own story. I would like to take that. Let me put it this way. I'm going to close this out. We're 2 hours and almost 10 minutes. I give a massive general overview. And there's a lot of content creators that do this way more better than I do. You guys know me. I do very general stuff. I will get more into what we're doing here as we go on. I'll do character examinations. That is coming out down the pipe, particularly when it comes to animes, because these characters have a lot of backstory that go about them. But yeah, I'll definitely do character examinations. I'll definitely do all that stuff, and I'll make some notes about that here soon. But I want to shout out one channel that really I do care about very much, that does a lot of backstories here. He's not doing the stuff that I really care about as much as he used to, and I'm sorry if you end up watching this, sir. That I'm not as much of a fan as I used to be, because you've kind of moved on, and that's fine. You had to. This channel is called Spy Kage. I will link it in the chat. Or I will, I will at least, you'll be able to see it in the chat when you're reading this, so you can always just bring that up. But he has been doing shows for quite a while. He's done a lot of videos on Naruto for a very long time. There is the link, and I will spell it out for you guys. Very easy to find. He's got 1.1 million subscribers as of right now. I've been watching him since he's had like I don't know, 1/4 of that. Let me see. Just to kind of trail back here, to see where I started here, is he's been doing videos for like 5 years now, and I started almost like well into 4 years ago. Yeah, I really like his content, so shout out to him. If you are watching my stuff, go check him out if you are a Naruto fan. He's absolutely great, and I'm going to send this off to him for him to watch just to see what he thinks. I'm going to get into a lot more details to what he has done to some degree. I'll talk about the chakra system and give that a bit of review because that's really good. I'll talk about these characters in the same way that he has done in some regards, and I'm not doing this to copy him. I'm just giving him as an homage that he does great content, and I like what he does, and I want to give him a shout out. A lot of his newer stuff isn't what I'm big on to, is that he's covered a lot of the core thesis, and so he's largely been doing, hey, what ifs, and all that, and that's fine. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it works for him, and what he's doing is, in his community still loves what he does. So anyway, without further ado, I am Tyberius D, and I am brain dead from this review, and I know this has been an absolute confarction. And some of you may really love this, some of you may hate it, but I wanted to just give a general overview of what the story is before I get into the nitty details that we go into. You didn't warn me. I knew it was happening when I started. I've been wanting to do one of the longer reviews because I haven't done one in a while. I did the Star Wars trilogies. I did the Star Trek TV shows. I did a lot of the Star Wars or Star Trek movies. I did a lot of these things. All of these have all gone over an hour, most of them ranging around 2 hours. I'm completely fine with that. I love the big picture shit. That's who I am. I will get into the nitty gritty in future coming episodes, but I'm trying to get community built out, getting the big expanse stuff before I hit the little stuff, because the little stuff tends to be a higher quality, right? You need to be on the ground running, and I'm not really impressed with the 2 episodes that I've done on the ground floor. I did Jexy, but I didn't like that review too much. Because I didn't care for the movie that much. I did Interstellar, which was really kind of lame. I didn't even remember the characters, and I really should have watched the movie before I watched it, but yeah, I did that one. And I've also done my favorite movie, Inception. It's the only one I was really actually happy with as far as a review, but yeah, still kind of getting the general format down. We finally got the intro out, so before we get to season 2, where I hope to have podcasts of this, have this all stretched out, I want to build out a bit of community, people to be very familiar with what I'm doing and the general format before I really hit the harder hitting stuff, who these characters are, what these movies are about, what's the individual story, and as we make the trek there and we build up into version 2.0, yeah, and so yeah, and that's actually the point, Wes, is that I want to have some of these reviews where it's like, hey, you forgot this, because there's so much more to add, and I don't want to put myself into a pigeonhole that before I build out the community, I run out of shit to talk about, which, granted, I'm not going to do that, but you get where I'm going. I give people a lot of reason to have more to come back to, and so without further ado, let's talk about the prequel sometime. Yeah, absolutely. So without further ado, I've been Tiberius D for Tiberius D Reviews. If you want to, or reviews with Tiberius D, pardon me. If you like me at all, go check out my other stuff. My claim to fame is I do actually geopolitical content, and I also do a talk show called Mask Off. If you want to catch that all live, check that out on Twitch. Twitch.tv/TiberiusD, or you can look at the responding channels. Everything is linked down below, so if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find that. And if you're watching this on Twitch, you're one of the few people that are in the chat involved. All the links are down below. So without further ado, it's been fun, but we're calling it quits. Have a nice day, everybody.